Hello everyone, how's it going? And welcome to my tier list for Wild Rift patch 4.1. We've had a whole bunch of changes, we've had new items, and the website has been fully updated for the new patch 4.1. So if you do want to check out the website, if you do want to check out one of your main champions, or maybe try out a new champion, make sure you check the link down in the description. You can check out everything that you need to know about the champion, ability breakdowns, runes, build, everything that you need to know. So make sure you head down to the description and check out Wild Rift Fire, because all these builds are done by myself and I always keep them up to date with the new patch. And with the builds being up to date, that means we get a new tier list to this patch. There has been quite a lot of changes. I've done a lot of personal changes on this tier list. I've got rid of the A+ tier because I didn't really think that was necessary, and for now I've got rid of the D tier because I don't think no champion deserves to be in the D tier. But we've got a few changes, we've got a few movements happening, and a few new champions and a few new roles being added, especially for Pyke, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. But with enough of me talking, let's head straight into it. First up, we have is the Baron lane. Now, in the S+ tier, nothing has changed in the Baron lane. And you're probably thinking to yourself, this is really odd. Isn't this supposed to be a tank meta? Aren't tanks very, very strong? The thing is that if you think of the one tank item that is really, really broken and really strong at the moment, which is Amarant's Twin Guards, that can still be built on every single bruiser that was already strong in the previous patch. So say, for example, someone like Wukong. Wukong is now a champion that you can just build Amarant's Twin Guard as a third item. And this basically makes him a bruiser that can deal a lot of damage, but also a tank. Same with Renekton, same with Jax, Fiora, Jace, Aatrox, Garen, Camille. You know, all these champions will still be able to build Amarant's Twin Guard. And Amarant's Twin Guard is also very strong with Hullbreaker, because not only do you gain the extra defenses when you're alone, so it's really, really good for split push champions like Jax and Fiora, you can also build Twin Guard on top of that to gain more defenses when you're split pushing. So that means you're just going to be that little bit more unkillable. Now, Akali and Gwen are two champions that you can build Amarant's Twin Guard on, but these are two champions that do very well against tanks and do very well against champions that are building a lot of magic resist or building a lot of HP. And one of the main reasons for that is Riftmaker. Riftmaker is the core item for these two champions, and Riftmaker allows you to deal true damage, which ignores all armor, all magic resist, and everything like that. And these two are just both very, very good scaling champions that when you get into the mid and the late game, probably won't be one shot as much and has the potential to still one shot enemy tanks, and kind of makes it a little bit difficult from time to time. But as I mentioned, there is no tanks for me that deserve to be an S+ tier, because I think tanks are decent, and I've moved some of the tanks up into S tier, as you can see, but I still do think that S+ tier is still the same. I still think the same champions are very, very strong. I still think the same champions can still do the same thing as what they did before, but they basically have a new OP item, which also allows them to just be super tanky at the same time. So like I said, I don't really think much has changed, but Wukong still very, very strong. Renekton still very, very strong. Jax and Fiora are good at split pushing. Jace is still really good. Aatrox, Garen, Camille, you know, all these champions are still very, very strong. Then we move into the S tier. Now, the S tier is when a few things have slightly changed a little. Let's talk a little bit about Urgot. So Urgot is the new champion that got released into Wild Rift. I think Urgot is decent. I think he's in a decent spot. I was thinking whether to put him in A tier or S tier. I was kind of like thinking in the middle. To be honest, if I still had the A+ tier, I would probably put him in there, because I think he's like on the brink of S, but also on the brink of A. I don't think that his damage output is crazy. I think it's one of the things that like Twin Guard just makes him insanely broken, because what you could do with him is you could just go Black Cleaver first item and then just build full tank afterwards. You go Death Dance, Thornmail, Spirit Visage, Twin Guard, all these tank items, and they all work very, very well for him. You can go Kraken Slayer. I do quite like Kraken Slayer for the early game aggression, because kind of Urgot's strength is in that early game and trying to catch enemies off guard with your third ability shield, with your second ability being able to rotate around enemy champions and just dealing a lot of burst damage. So that means that Kraken Slayer will help you do that little bit of extra burst damage. But you can also go for Conqueror as well if you want to play more for the team fights and more play for the more prolonged fights in the end. But I think Urgot is like S tier, A tier. Let me know what you think of Urgot down in the comments, but I think he's in a pretty decent spot at the moment. A few other champions that I have moved up. I've moved up Dr. Mundo. I did play Dr. Mundo fairly recently on stream. I do have a video of him coming out very, very soon. But Dr. Mundo is very, very strong at the moment. Very strong with pretty much all the tank items. Sunfire Aegis is very, very good at the moment. You can also go Searing Crown on him if you want to as well, because Mundo likes to do a little bit of AoE damage when he's close to enemy champions. You can then just go Twin Guard. The new Mantle of the 12th Hour is also very good with Dr. Mundo because it scales with a bonus HP, and Mundo already has a lot of bonus HP because you can go something like Sunfire into Warmogs and then try and go down that route, go for Mantle, and then because you're going to have a lot of healing from your ultimate, you're also going to have a lot of healing because of Mantle of the 12th Hour. But yeah, you just build Twin Guards, Thornmail, and you just go full tank. And the crazy thing is about Dr. Mundo is that even if he builds full tank, he still does a lot of damage because his cleaver, his first ability does a lot of damage, his third ability does a lot of damage, and you can also use your second ability to heal up and deal damage to enemies around you. So I think Mundo is pretty good at the moment, like I said, especially with the new tank items. The other tanks I want to talk about, Sion is also very good with Mantle of the 12th Hour. As I mentioned, Mantle of the 12th Hour scales with bonus health. And if you don't know from Sion's passive, he gains bonus health basically throughout the game. And you can get the same amount of bonus health as you get into the mid and the late game. Especially with the items built on top of that, you know, Sunfire, he also goes for Hullbreaker as well. Then you can go for Mantle plus Twin Guard, and he basically becomes unkillable. He just becomes a CC beast, completely unkillable, can split push, take towers very, very quickly, and he's also an insane tank that does a lot of damage. So again, Sion, another champion I think is very, very strong at the moment. Shen, just as strong as what he was before. He still stays in the S tier. Again, another champion that can use Twin Guard very, very well. I think the great thing about Shen in Barrel Lane now is that Sunfire now does more damage to minions in the lane. So that means that Shen's split push potential just got even quicker than what it was before. So you can go Divine Sunderer for the trading in laning phase. Then you can go for Sunfire into Twin Guard. And you can even go for like Hullbreaker, and you just become a split push beast with Shen if you want to go for that route. And I think Sunfire is great for any tanks, even if you're going jungle or even in the barrel lane, because Sunfire does more damage to monsters and also more damage to minions. Gragas, you can play tank Gragas in the barrel lane. I think it works very, very well in the current meta, as I mentioned already with Twin Guard. Darius is still pretty decent. Irelia is still very, very good. Again, more champions that can just build Twin Guard. Set's pretty good. Malphite as a full tank is also very good at the moment in the current meta. You could just go for like Iceborne Gauntlet, Sunfire, Twin Guard. Again, just more tank items, and Malphite I think deserves to be in the S tier. And then Riven as well is also very good, and I think that she definitely deserves to be in the S tier. Moving on down, obviously, as I mentioned, I got rid of the A+ tier, so I had to move some of the champions down. I basically moved all the A+ tier champions down into A tier, and I had a thought to myself. I was like, okay, so these champions are A tier. These are like probably like your standard champions that can do okay in any scenario. So I was thinking, I was like, okay, what champions can do well? And I was thinking, okay, Dr. Mundo is very good at the moment. Let's move him up to S tier. What champions stay the same? These for me, all the champions that stay the same. And then what champions deserve to move down? So I moved, I think it was only Graves that I moved down as far as I'm aware, for the Baron lane. But let's go through these champions. Pantheon's a bit of an interesting one. I still think you can get a lot of early game aggression with Pantheon. You can probably get a little bit of an early game advantage, but he does get outscaled quite quickly. Singed, I haven't actually tried Singed, but I've seen a lot of popular builds now with Singed going Searing Crown, Rylai's, Leandri's Torment, items like that, and I've seen a lot of people have success with Singed, so maybe Singed deserves to be a little bit higher, but I think Singed is probably a better mid laner than a Baron laner because he does struggle a lot against bruisers, but he does a lot better in the mid lane against some assassins or against some mages because he can just roam around and he can just easily clear minion waves. Yone, I just don't think deserves to be S tier. I don't think Yone does well in this meta in the Baron lane, especially against some bruisers. A champion that takes a while to scale, and to be honest, I think Yone is going to struggle to kill pretty much any of the bruisers or any of the tanks sitting above him, unless you're really good with him, obviously, then it's a little bit different. But I don't think he deserves to be in an S tier. I think he deserves to be in, I think he's just sitting in the A tier. I think he's fine in the A tier for now. Maybe deserves to be moved up a little excuse me, a little if you are comfortable with him. Again, Kennen of another champion that I don't think will do too well in this current meta. You do have a lot of early game aggression. You can poke out melee champions in the early game. Other than that, you're not really too good. Olaf is okay, can be pretty good in the Baron lane, just not as good as what he is in the jungle. BT, you still have the same champions, so Teemo, still the same champion. Nothing's really changed with Teemo. Trendemir, again, nothing has changed too much. I know that he did get some changes in this most recent patch, but I don't think the changes are going to affect him too much, to be honest with you. I think the changes are going to be just the same, I think, for Trendemir. Nasus, again, nothing has really changed for him. He still sits in a B tier for me. And then I did move Graves down. I think Graves is just going to struggle in general in the Baron lane meta because Hullbreaker doesn't work very good on him. He did get nerfed a few times, and he's not really a champion that can really build Twin Guard. I mean, you can build Twin Guard on pretty much any champion, but I think he's just going to struggle to try and break through and try and kill basically any tanks or any bruisers in the Baron lane. And then you have Kayle sitting in C tier, which is kind of obvious to know. I think it's just a general thing that Kayle is going to be sitting down in the C tier. But yeah, nothing else has really changed. I know Garen got a few buffs in the most recent patch. I still think Garen is totally, you know, fine. I think he was already S+ tier before. I don't really know why he got buffs. I don't think anyone else changed. I think Siren got a few changes where his AD ratio got buffed, but his crowd control did get nerfed. So Siren's laning phase is even stronger now than what it was before. And I do have a Siren video also coming out very soon as well. But I think that's everything to talk about in the Baron lane. Let's move on to the jungle. There's a lot of champions in the jungle. As you can see, there's a lot of champions. But let's start off at the top. So jungle, there's only one champion that I've moved up into S+ tier, and that is Gragas. I think Gragas is probably a champion that I probably should have moved up into S+ tier a long time ago now. It's a champion that I've had quite a lot of success on recently, and is actually my next A to Z champion. I think Gragas is very, very strong at the moment, especially with his full AP build. He can look to one-shot carries. He has crowd control. He has pretty much everything you want to. He has healing, he has crowd control, he has damage. He has pretty much everything you want for a jungler. And I think Gragas can fit this meta very, very well, because even if he's against tanks, he can still do a lot of crowd control. He can still poke and still do a lot of work for his team. Other than that, everything else is kind of the same again with jungle in the S+ tier. You know, Wukong is still very strong, very safe to play. Aatrox is very strong. Lee Sin's very strong. Kha'Zix, I think, is decent. I think the only thing with Kha'Zix is that he might struggle to burst down some of these carries that have Twin Guard. So it might be a little bit more difficult for him, but I still think he's a very strong champion. Olaf's still very, very strong. The only question mark that I had was Lilia. But I actually think Lilia might be pretty good in this meta, because Lilia likes to go for items like Liandry's, like Riftmaker. And I think that actually suits Lilia, that it's going in towards more of a tank meta, because it means that she won't get one shot as much, and she'll be able to use that movement speed to her benefit. And use that movement speed, go around enemy champions, keep using abilities, and keep burning them with Liandry's Torment, and keep dealing true damage with Riftmaker, and use that CC to her advantage. So I didn't move her down. I was tempted to move her down, but I didn't move her down to S tier. But I don't know if she's going to be as strong as what she was before. It just depends if what I said actually happens to her or not. And then Diana, obviously, with her burst damage and with how strong she is, she's still a very, very strong champion. As for the S tier, again, not really much else has changed in the S tier. The only champion that I've actually moved up is Shen. Now, Shen I put in like A+/A tier before. I've actually moved him up into S tier. I think Shen is an insanely strong jungler right now, especially because of the buffs that happened to Sunfire in the jungle, and also because we're getting into a more tank meta with Twin Guard. I honestly think Shen could even be an S+ tier. I think he's super easy to play in the jungle. You don't need to worry about ganks at all. You could just keep farming, and as long as you keep an eye on the minimap, as long as you use your ultimate at the right times, he's just going to be a very, very easy jungler to play. He does a lot of damage, he has crowd control, he has tankiness. What more do you want from a jungler? I mean, Shen pretty much has it all. And to be honest, I could probably move Shen up into S+ tier. I think that he's a great jungler at the moment. As for the other junglers, you know, everything else is pretty much the same in S tier. You got Irelia here, Vi, Xiao, all these junglers are still totally fine. Morgana still has really good jungle clear and is still pretty decent. Probably a little bit more difficult to play, a little bit difficult to master, but I think Morgana is still very, very good. Riven's still insanely strong. Echo with his burst damage. Same with Evelyn as well. You can definitely look to carry games with her. Fiora's pretty decent. Shyvana, I know that some people say that Shyvana deserves to be an S+ tier. I don't think she does personally, because I just don't think you get as much benefit from AFK farming in the jungle anymore because of the new like conservation stacks and everything. But I think Shyvana does pretty well against tanks, so I think that might be a little bit different, where she might be good in trades now. She might be decent when ganking, but the thing is that Shyvana's ganks are not really too great. You're just kind of waiting and farming for the objectives, but if you wait and farm for the objectives, then an early game jungler or jungler has more efficient ganks in the early game can probably take an advantage for their team before Shyvana even gets to a point of the game where she becomes relevant. Jarvan's still very, very strong. I've seen like full damage Jarvan builds pop off completely. Yoni's still really good in the jungle. Red Kayn, I think, is insanely strong at the moment. You can see that I put Blue Kayn down in B tier, but I think Red Kayn is disgustingly broken this patch. Even though they did nerf Red Kayn a little bit, I think Red Kayn is insanely strong, because Red Kayn does more damage based on the enemy's maximum health, and also does healing with his ultimate based on the target's maximum health. And what are we getting into? We're getting into a tank meta, so that means Ras Kayn will be able to heal a lot more, even though the healing ratio did get nerfed. Be able to use the crowd control, and also can tank with Twin Guards. You know, another champion that can be a really big tank with Twin Guard and still do a lot of damage. Nunu is still very, very strong, especially after the recent buffs. I don't think I would really go for Rod of Ages anymore. I'd more go for Searing Crown into Sunfire Aegis. Sunfire Aegis into Searing Crown, and go for a more tank Nunu build. But again, another champion that could be very, very strong, and Fizz as well with her with his burst potential. Moving on down into A, B, and C, we have a few new champions in the A tier. First is Urgot jungle. I think Urgot jungle is actually pretty decent. You might have seen my Urgot gameplay in the jungle as well. His early jungle clear is pretty quick, and as the game goes on, I think his jungle clear gets faster and faster. But again, the only problem is that Urgot's strength is mainly to do with the early game and trying to get an advantage in the early game, which you can't really do as a jungler. So I do think his Baron lane is probably better than jungle, in my opinion. I actually think he does pretty well. I was kind of worried that Urgot might struggle a little bit. I mean, he still will struggle against champions with Hullbreaker plus Twin Guard. He's not a champion that I think will be good and competitive, because there's a lot of champion that just goes Hullbreaker, they'll probably go Twin Guard, and they'll just split push for the whole game. Urgot can't contest the split push. You know, he's not going to build Hullbreaker, he's not going to contest with split pushes. He wants to be a team fight champion, which is why he could be very good in jungle, because you don't have to worry about split pushing. You can just keep joining team fights and keep trying to get picks with the rest of your team. And another new champion is Pyke jungle. I don't know if I'm underrating Pyke or not. I put Pyke in A tier. I've also put Pyke in A tier and mid lane as well. I haven't had the chance. I think I had one game of Pyke jungle, and it went like okay. It went pretty decent as far as I remember. I haven't had the game of Pyke mid lane. Maybe I'll have to give that a try. But I think Pyke jungle can definitely work. I think Pyke mid lane can definitely work. I think the champion is very, very strong at the moment. I think you could definitely do a lot of things with Pyke jungle. You know, his roaming's really insane. His gank potential is really good. You can look to burst down carries. You can farm the jungle quite quickly now with the buffs that happen to Pyke in the jungle, and you can also farm minions very quickly with the buff to minion damage as well. So I think overall Pyke could definitely be played in the jungle and the mid lane. I just don't know if it's S tier worthy or not. I just kept in the A tier for now. A few other champions that I was kind of thinking of moving up, but I don't think deserve to be moved up that much. Rammus and Amumu, I think, are two champions that have definitely benefited a lot from the tank items, and also the new Shimmer and Stark, which is a new starting item for junglers. For tank junglers anyway, that needed a little bit of help with clear speed. Rammus, I think, benefits from that a lot. Amumu benefits from it a little bit, even though he already had pretty good jungle clear speed because of his second ability and also his third ability. But both these junglers are really good tank junglers if you just want a safe tank jungler to play. Do they deserve to be S tier? I'm not too sure. I think keeping them in A tier is probably the best for now, but they could definitely move up. I think Mundo could be pretty good in the jungle now. I think Mundo is just an interesting one where his he's not really a jungler anymore because of his like rework that happened. He's more of a Baron laner, but he can still work in the jungle. I don't think there's a problem. Pantheon can still do pretty well. Graves, I'm not too sure about. I think Graves is like A, maybe B. I'm not too sure. I think I have to test him out a little bit in the jungle to see how he is. Darius jungle still works really good. Gwen jungle is also still very insane. You can just farm up and just scale into an absolute beast. Rengar's still really good. Zed's still good in the jungle. Camille, clear speed, not that good, but still can work out. Nautilus, you can go for tank Nautilus jungle now if you want to. I know AP Nautilus is very, very popular at the moment, but you can go for tank Nautilus jungle if you want to. And obviously Pyke is there. But obviously with the changes that I did, and obviously with A+ tier being removed, I had to move some junglers down to C tier and some junglers down to B tier. So I moved Tryndamere and Master Yi down to C tier. Again, I think both these champions just don't really work too well. I don't think Tryndamere does a lot, to be honest with you. And the same with Master Yi. I think Master Yi is going to find it even more difficult now to try and break through some of these tanks. Even though they buffed his true damage a few patches ago, I still don't think he's that good. Tryndamere got a few changes, but again, it's more to do with the Baron lane than the actual jungle. Then I had to move a few champions down into B tier, and this was quite difficult. I had to think of champions in A tier that I thought weren't good enough and that needed to move down into B tier. First one is Shadow Kayn. I just don't like Shadow Kayn at all. I think Shadow Kayn actually got a pretty big nerf with Twin Guards. I think it's very, very difficult now for Kayn to basically one-shot anyone with Twin Guard because they're just going to have so much armor. They're going to have so many resistances, and I don't know how Shadow Assassin Kayn even one-shots anyone. I mean, Shadow Assassin Kayn struggled before to one-shot everyone. Now he's going to struggle even more to one-shot anyone. I just don't think he's as good, and I think Ross Kayn is like 20 times better. Like Red Kayn is so much better than Blue Kayn right now. It's not even close, even with the buff in the most recent patch. Jax, I just don't think farms the jungle as quick anymore because of the changes that happened. I think you can still make Jax jungle work, but you basically have to be AFK for like the first 10 minutes, like probably from first Drake as well, because you need to farm up. You need to get 2 items to be a relevant champion, and I think that just takes way too long. And then Warwick as well. I think Warwick's an interesting one. Obviously Warwick did get nerfed in the recent patch in terms of jungle. They did buff his Baron lane though, which I think is quite interesting. I didn't actually put Warwick in Baron lane because I'm not too sure if it would work, but it'll probably be like B tier or you know, B tier and Baron lane as well. I just don't think Warwick is a very good champion. He's a very beginner friendly champion. He's still pretty decent. He can still carry, but he's just not as good as any of the champions above. A few other champions I was thinking of moving down. I kind of mentioned them already. Camille was one of them that I was thinking of moving down because her jungle clear speed is just not as good as before, but I think she's still a very good carry and she has a lot of abilities that can definitely benefit your team a lot. And Graves as well. Graves is probably the only other one that I could potentially move down, but I haven't tested Graves in the new patch, so I will have to figure that out. But yeah, that is pretty much everything in jungle. I've pretty much gone through everything that I wanted to with jungle. Now on to mid lane. Again, another lane that, to be honest, hasn't really changed that much. There's not that much that have changed in the mid lane. All the S+ tier champions are the same. Again, there's not really any tanks that get played in the mid lane anyway, so there's not really going to be much change with this tier list. I think the champions that are in S+ tier will still do really, really well. Champions like Ahri is still really good in the mid lane. Very, very easy to play. Very good crowd control. Diana with her burst damage is also very, very good. Yone mid lane is just a lot better than Baron lane. He has a lot better matchups in the mid lane, and he kind of struggles a lot against bruisers. But if you're not against a bruiser in the mid lane, if you're against, you know, maybe an assassin or maybe a mage, then you can look to outplay and just do a lot more on the map and rotate a lot more. You get a lot more freedom in the mid lane, and you know, whereas the Baron lane you don't have that much freedom. Kassadin, weak early game obviously, but if you scale, he becomes an absolute beast. Karma pretty much has it all: CC, shielding, damage, everything. Very, very easy to play. Very good mid laner. Akali's still very good, as I mentioned, in Baron lane with Riftmaker, can still one shot and do a lot of work. Same with Vex. If you can get the resets with Vex, her fear is also very, very strong right now. She is still very, very strong. And Zoe with her one-shot potential, another champion that is really, really good. Moving on to S tier. Again, S tier, nothing much has changed. I think everything is pretty much the exact same for S tier. You know, Irelia is pretty strong. Katarina is pretty strong. I think Katarina's still really, really good. Zed's still really good. The control mages like Ziggs and Orianna are still very good. Even though AP Galio did kind of get a nerf in a way, AP Galio is still pretty good. You can play him full AP Galio mid lane. Twisted Fate is still really, really good. Yasuo, Lucian mid lane is really, really good. Gragas, Corki, Jace Faye. You know, all these champions are still good. Like I said, not much has changed in the mid lane because the meta didn't really change too much in the mid lane. There wasn't really that many changes to champions and wasn't really that many changes in terms of items and everything as well. Moving into the A tier, obviously this is where like the A+ tier champions had to move down. That also means that I had to move some champions down from A tier down to B tier, because there was just way too many champions in A tier. I think I've been pretty fair with this. I think all the champions in A tier deserve to be there. Aurelion Sol not as strong as what he once was, but I still think can create a lot of pressure on the map and can still be very, very good. As I mentioned in the Baron lane, I think Singe mid lane, you can do a lot more work and you can be a lot more impactful in the mid lane. Lux is decent, is okay. Kennan's pretty decent. Echo's pretty decent. Akshan's the only one that I could move up into S tier, and probably Pyke as well. I've seen Pyke mid lane do a hell of a lot of work. You know, the crazy thing about Pyke mid lane now is that you can wave clear mid lane very, very quickly, and it allows you to roam around the map. You just take a little bit of damage, you walk up, clear the minion wave, and as soon as you clear that minion wave, you can look to rotate around the map. And that rotating around the map with Pyke is just so scary for any champion in any lane, because if he lands one hook, he can combo that with his root, and then he can just easily one-shot you. So it's very, very scary. But I haven't tried it out yet. Maybe again, I'm underrating Pyke, and maybe he deserves to be an S tier. Akshan still very, very good as well. Can definitely move up into S tier. Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one. I think if you're good at Akshan, you can definitely be S tier. I've seen a lot of good Akshan players pop off, and I've even seen Akshan banned in legendary queue because of, you know, a few players that are really, really good on him. Pyke as well, and then Veigar is like okay, which obviously meant I had to move some champions down. I think these champions just don't really offer too much. Seraphine is okay, but can get punished very, very easily. Same with Brand as well. You can get punished very easily with Brand if you use your abilities too early. Then you just become very, very vulnerable, and there's not really much you can do. His wave clear is also not that decent. Annie, it's like if you could one-shot someone, great, but to be honest, what can you one-shot in this current meta with Annie? Probably no one, except for like the main carries in the backline, which to be honest, you should never be close to Annie in the first place. And Morgana as well is just not that good of a mid laner with Kayle sitting down. In C tier, not really much else to say in the mid lane. Like I said, the meta hasn't really changed too much, so some of the champions have not really changed too much either, so nothing really changes there. Now this is where the interesting part comes in. Obviously Dragon Lane, one of my main roles, with support as well. There's a few changes here. Baron Lane, dual lane's an interesting one, because dual laners at the moment are basically just building Twin Guard as well. I think it's very, very weird, because, you know, Lucian can build Twin Guard, Tristana can, Kai'Sa can, every champion can build Twin Guards. I think it's absolutely disgusting. So I'm going to talk about dual lane in a non-Twin Guard matter, which might be a bit difficult, but I mean, it's going to be very difficult, because the reason why I moved Vayne up into S+ tier is because we're in a Twin Guard meta, and because we're in a tank meta, and Vayne is one of the best AD carries against tanks because of her true damage and because of how insane she is. There's even like new builds going around where you can build like Twin Guard on her, because you don't really care too much about damage, because of her silver bolts, and from her true damage she can go just like Blader King, Trinity Force into Twin Guard, into Warmogs. You could just build like tank afterwards if you want to. I've seen some crazy builds with Vayne, but like I said, the main thing about Vayne is with her true damage. The true damage is such an important part of Vayne, and that is why Vayne for me deserves to be in the S+ tier right now. Yes, her laning phase is a little bit weak, but I think you'll be quite surprised that it's not as weak as what you think. But as long as you farm up, as long as you get like 2 items, then you're just an absolute beast in team fights, and there's not really much that they could do. Even with Twin Guard, Vayne can just completely break through you. Lucian's still really good, still a lot of early game pressure, and Lucian is just an insane AD carry, very easy to play, still really good. I don't think anything has changed with Lucian at all. Same with Tristana, Caitlyn, and Kai'Sa. These are 3 of probably the best scaling AD carries in the current meta. Tristana, with her insane range and her insane burst potential with her bombs, is still really good. And also she can jump around pretty much everywhere with her rocket jump. She can just get resets all the time. Has her ultimate for peeling, very good. Caitlyn is still really good, even the nerf that happened a few patches ago. Caitlyn is still very strong in the current meta because of her range and because how insane she is with her ultimate and everything else. Kai'Sa's still really good as well with her upgrades. Still very, very good champion. Jinx, I just think is just a weaker hyper carry, but you know, she can still do really well, especially after the changes that happened to Jinx. I think she's in a pretty decent spot. Samira's pretty decent, but very, very hard to play. Same with Draven. These two champions could definitely move up into S+ tier if you know how to play them, but they're very, very hard to play, so that's why they're in S tier for me. Sorry, excuse me. Corki's really good because he has a lot of shred and he has a lot of mixed damage, which is very, very hard to itemize against and has a lot of scaling. Corki is again another one of them champions that you have a lot of flexibility with your build, and because you deal both magic and also physical damage, it's very, very hard to itemize. But if someone just builds twin guard, you get a bunch of armor and a bunch of magic resist, so it's really difficult to Corki to break through them anyway. But you can break through a little bit of their armor and everything with your Gatling gun. You can break through it a little bit. Zai is pretty decent, pretty good peeling AD carry at the moment, still pretty decent. Ezreal is still really, really good. Varus, you can go AD Varus or now AP Varus, which has been really, really popular, especially with the buffs that happened to AP Varus. I think that it could be very, very strong in this current meta because we're in a tank meta. And because AP Varus does a lot of damage to champions that have a lot of maximum health, then I think Varus could be very, very strong. Zeri, I think, is decent. I don't think she deserves to be S+ tier. I think she's S at best. I think that's pretty much it with her. I don't think there's a lot of, you know, different way. There's not a lot of different ways that you can build her. You can build her like a crit scaling, or you can build her for like Trinity Force, which has her a little bit of a earlier power spike. Again, what I had to do is I had to change some of the A tier and B tier champions, so I had to move champions around. Obviously I moved all the A+ tier down to A tier, and then I was like, okay, what deserves to be down in B tier? So you've got, like, you know, champions like Ashe that's down in A tier, which I think she's okay, but I think she might struggle a little bit. Jhin just sucks at the moment. They still didn't fix Lord Dominic's regards with Jhin, so he's still in the same spot that he was before. If they just fix Lord Dominic's regards with the Jhin, I think he would actually be really, really good, because there's like a new build going around with him with like Ghostblade plus Lord Dominic's regards with Electrocute. Problem is that Lord Dominic's regards doesn't really work on him, and Misfortune as well. I just don't think is as good of an AD carry. Then you kind of have your 3 AP champions. Obviously AP champions are very, very strong in competitive at the moment, but I just don't think they're that strong in solo queue. But these are like the 3 best to play. Lux, Ziggs, and Karma are probably the 3 best AP champions to play. Then you have champions in the B tier. Obviously Senna is normally down in the C tier, but I think farming Senna is actually pretty decent. I think you could definitely make it work. Especially with the buffs that happen to her over and over again. I think Senna is actually in a very, very good spot at the moment, especially in supports. But you just have the weaker AP mages down here, like Morgana, Seraphine, Veigar, Orianna, and Brand. These AP mages probably can't do as much as the ones above, and they don't really just offer too much. And Akshan dual lane doesn't really work. You can't really make full benefit of Akshan's early aggression, and you can't really look to use your heroic swing to play aggressive, because if you're against supports that have crowd control, they can easily just CC you. You just don't have a lot of openings with Akshan in the draw lane. And then finally, we move on to support. Now, support was a bit of again, another interesting one. Again, I don't think much has changed with support. Obviously, I had to move some champions around again, because obviously I got rid of A+ tier. Karma and Nami, sorry. I think there's no surprise that both these champions stay in the S+ tier. The crazy thing is now is that pretty much every single support just runs Relic Shield. I'm going to go through all the supports actually and tell you who runs Relic Shield and who runs Spectral Sickle. Relic, Sickle, Relic, well, probably Sickle, but I mean, Yubi could definitely work with Relic for sure. Relic, Sickle. There's like 3 or 4 champions that run Sickle right now. Ashe, the reason why Ashe runs it is because it's really easy to land your volley, and it's really easy to stack Spectral Sickle with Ashe. But again, Ashe is another champion that you could probably run Relic Shield, and that's probably not a problem at all. Senna, you just want to run Spectral Sickle because you don't want to farm that much with Relic Shield, because you want to try and get as many souls as possible, and your souls are actually pretty important, so you don't want to last hit cannon minions, for example. because if you don't last hit a cannon minion, then you're always guaranteed to get a soul. And also Sickle just helps you deal a little bit of extra damage in the early game, and also allows you to try and stack as much souls as possible, because you always want to auto attack enemy champions. Obviously Yumi is like always inside someone, so Spectral Sickle is normally the best for her, but if you can't land your first ability, you can maybe jump out and use your auto attack on your passive to work with Sickle. Again, it might be a little bit difficult, so you can run Relic Shield if you want to. And then Morgana can just easily use her pull. You just use her pull, and then that's pretty much it. Other than that, everyone else runs Relic Shield. And why? Because the insane Relic Shield buff. Relic Shield got an insane buff in this most recent patch. You now get 75% execution on range and melee champions. That means a minion only needs to be at 75% health, and you can last hit them and execute them. This gives you insane lane priority. You also get an insane amount of extra gold now with Relic Shield, and you can stack your Relic Shield super quickly. I had my first Relic Shield fully not fully upgraded, but like the first upgrade done at like 3 minutes, and my second upgrade was done at like 6 minutes in the game. It's insane how much extra gold you get now. It's insane how quick you can actually stack Relic Shield, and it's really strong. And it's crazy how strong Relic Shield actually is. But as I mentioned, you know, Karma and Nami still do the same thing as what they did in the previous patch. Both do a lot of damage, both have a lot of crowd control, both have healing and shielding, and both can just make a lot of plays. Pyke maybe can move up into S+ tier as well. Not really much has changed with Pyke in terms of support. It was mainly mid lane and jungle that got changed with Pyke. Nothing really changed with Pyke's support. I still think he's in the same spot as before. He's just a very good carry support. If you know how to play Pyke, if you know how to make plays with Pyke, then it can definitely work, and you can roam around and make plays. Thresh is still really good as a tank support. Same with Rakan as well. If you want to go for AP damage and try and make plays, you know, Thresh, you can just make a playmaker, be a playmaker. Rakan could definitely be a playmaker. Lulu is just very good shielding support. You just can't do that much with Lulu compared to other champions. These tank supports like Alistar, Nautilus, Leona, for example, I think might be really strong because of Twin Guard. You basically build Twin Guard like third or second item now on supports, and you get super tanky. There's even a situation where I got 1,000 armor with Leona, which I'll probably show like a little YouTube shorts or a video very soon on it. But Leona is absolutely disgusting at the moment with Twin Guard. And it's the same with Alistar, and it's the same with Nautilus. These tank junglers are really insane. And that's why I moved Leona up into S tier, by the way. Because you can make a lot more plays with Leona, and you're just a lot more tankier. Galio as well, another tank support that works really well. Also got buffed to support. Senna's still really good. Yumi still very good, and Janna's also still very good. So these champions, all for me, are still sitting in the S tier. A few champions in the A tier. I mean, there's probably like one champion I would maybe move up, which is Lux, but I just haven't seen Lux have a lot of success in support. But you could definitely find success with Lux support if you want to, so she could definitely move up into S tier. All the other champions are like kind of meh. I think Seraphine is better now than what she once was, and that's why I moved her up from B tier up into A tier, because of her empowered shield now. Her empowered second ability now stacks the shield instead of resets the shield, so you now get basically double shielding now with Seraphine passive. Sona, pretty weak early game, but can still scale and still be an absolute beast. Brom is just like the weaker of the tank supports, and you can't really make that many plays. He's more of a peeling support. Soraka's pretty decent. I think she actually got a pretty insane early game nerf because of her W nerf, but her Q did get nerfed, so she has a bit more trading power. B tier is like kind of the unique champions like Shen, Nasus, and Set. I think these champions could still work, but they're just not as strong. And then down in the C tier is Blitzcrank and Morgana. I don't think any of these two supports really work. I mean, they can work, but I just don't think they're as good, and I don't think they offer as much as the supports above. That's pretty much everything. If you guys have any questions with any of these champions, or if you feel like a champion deserves to move up or deserves to move down, then as always, please let me know. But as I mentioned, I've completely removed the A+ tier, so there's a few more champions in A, B, and C tier, and obviously D tier is not a thing at the moment, because I don't think any champion deserves to be in D tier, because I feel like you could definitely perform on any champion in the game and you could still do really well. But as I said at the start of the video, if you do want to check out Wild Rift Fire, if you do want to check out all the latest builds with all the latest champions, if you want to go to champions like Aatrox, if you want to go to champions like Kai'Sa, you know, Vayne, Camille, all these champions are all up to date with all the new items and everything that you need to know about the champions. You know, with Vayne, with Camille, with Twin Guard, everything you need to know with all these new champions, even with the supports as well, go in Twin Guard. Everything is on this website, so make sure you check it out. As always, I appreciate you all for tuning in. I appreciate you all for watching if you have done up until this point. I appreciate all the support. I've got a lot more content coming out over the next few days, so things will not be slowing down on this channel. So take care of yourselves, have a good one, and I'll see you next Wild Rift video. Peace.